This slidecast will explore the work of American marine biologist and environmentalist Rachel Carson. The presentation will explore Carson's life, her work as a biologist, and her predictions for a bleak future, while exploring the reasons why she can in fact be considered a futurist. Rachel Carson was born on May 27, 1907 in Springdale, Pennsylvania, on a 65-acre farm near Pittsburgh, but just down the Allegheny River from the farmlands and orchards was the American Glue Factory. The factory polluted both the river and the air, and there was a constant stench due to the daily slaughter of horses. Pittsburgh, the iron and steel capital of the world, was known for having the worst air and water pollution in the country. After taking an avid interest in animals and literature as a child, Rachel attended university at the Pennsylvania College for Women, where she explored her interests in English, biology, genetics, and zoology. When Carson came back from college, the glue factory was gone, but it had been replaced by the tall smokestacks of a coal and coke company, and much of Springdale's woodlands had been cleared for new housing developments. Carson did her postgraduate work in zoology, earning her master's degree at Johns Hopkins in 1932. She went on to work for the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, becoming the second woman to ever hold full-time employment within the Bureau. Carson's role involved working with marine biologists in the study of fish populations, as well as researching and writing articles for the Baltimore Sun and Atlantic Monthly. Carson also went on to publish her first work, Under the Sea Wind, in 1941, about the behavior of fish and seabirds. She would go on to also write two sequels to Under the Sea Wind in the early 1950s, but it was in 1945 that Carson first began to study DDT, and the increasingly popular new pesticide would have a significant effect on the rest of her career and would prompt her to write her famous work, Silent Spring. So we know Carson as the biologist, the author, and even as a feminist, but can we truly label her a futurist? I believe that we can, and I will argue that Rachel Carson is a futurist. She studied and engaged with chemical pesticides, most significantly DDT, and she saw a bleak future for humans, animals, and the environment as a result of the unregulated and widespread use of this new technology. So what is DDT? DDT was first synthesized in 1874 but wasn't discovered to kill insects until 1939. During the Second World War, it was used in powder form to kill lice on soldiers, but the chemical became widely mass-produced in the late 1940s and 50s as a pesticide used in agriculture to combat insects as well as to control mosquito populations in malaria-ridden areas. As DDT gained popularity for its effective use against insects, aerial spraying became a common way to protect large agricultural areas. But scientists like Carson began to explore the indiscriminate nature of DDT. After being contacted by New York State farmers and friends that bird populations had been dying in rapid numbers on their properties where there had been recent aerial sprayings, Carson began to collect research. As Carson continued to explore the destructive nature of these highly toxic pesticides, she came to the conclusion that widespread usage in such concentrated doses were destroying local environments. The power of these chemicals to kill organisms could not be limited to target specific species or populations. Carson specifically investigated dwindling bird populations and analyzed the development of disease and mutation in agricultural crops. In her chapter of Silent Spring, Through a Narrow Window, Carson explored the genetic effect of chemical exposure for humans, demonstrating that DDT could result in everything from chronic cough to genetic mutations and additional chromosomes, causing mental defects and embryo mutations. In her chapter, One in Every Four, she acknowledged the growing cancer rates due to carcinogens and pollution. Carson saw a further problem with DDT and similar chemical pesticides. Studies done on species such as yellow jackets and Japanese beetles had showed that excessive spraying had in fact allowed populations to become more resistant, developing characteristics that would allow them to only be mildly affected or completely unaffected by pesticide control. In this way, pesticide usage was not solving the problem, it was intensifying it. The culmination of Carson's research came together in the 1962 book Silent Spring. This work was made to be accessible for public audiences. The work served to educate and warn about the destructive effects of industry that were changing and harming the environment. The warning went further. If pollution and chemical spraying continued at the present rate, the damage may be irreversible. Pollution of the air, the water, and the soil was all a real and increasing threat. Silent Spring was hugely successful when it was published in September of 1962 and quickly made the New York Times bestseller list. As DDT had been widely marketed in the United States as safe and effective for families, Carson experienced significant backlash from pesticide companies who not only attacked her work but personally as well, labeling her as a communist sympathizer and dismissed her as a spinster. However, Carson had influential advocates as well. In the summer of 1963, Carson made a formal address to the United States Congress under the presidency of John F. Kennedy. She urged the government to stop its reckless aerial spraying campaigns and recognize the wealth of research that demonstrated the numerous damages being done by pesticides like DDT. But in 1963, Carson's own health was also deteriorating. She had suffered from breast cancer for many years and died of a heart attack in April of 1964. Carson died before she could have truly seen the impact of her work. The Kennedy government created a committee to investigate the pesticides in 1963. However, the creation of the 1970 Environmental Protection Agency and the banning of the domestic sale in 1971 can arguably be attributed to Carson's work as well. Carson has often been regarded as the mother of the modern environmental movement, but the important question is, can she truly be considered a futurist? We can try to define the term. A futurist is someone who studies or has a vision of the future, especially involving the development or use of technology. Did Carson engage with technology? Yes. She was working with a revolutionary chemical product at the time, DDT, one which had not yet been studied in detail before it became available for widespread usage. Carson studied the properties of this substance, explored its effects on a variety of human and animal populations, and concluded that it had many unsafe and in fact dangerously detrimental qualities. This, in turn, led to her vision of a bleak future. If humans were to continue to use chemical pesticides and, more broadly, continue to pollute the earth unimpeded, Carson saw dwindling animal populations, collapsed ecosystems, higher rates of disease and mutation, and ultimately death. For these reasons, Rachel Carson should be considered an environmentalist, an author, and a futurist. Carson's work was also a call to action. Carson saw that her bleak and dystopic vision of the future was not necessarily inevitable, but it would involve a major change in action on the parts of governments, industries, and everyday citizens. One of her most famous quotes from Silent Spring reads, "We now stand where two roads diverge, but unlike the road in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we have long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress with great speed, but at its end lies disaster. The other fork in the road offers our only chance to reach a destination that assures the preservation of the earth. The choice, after all, is ours to make."